I've got one of our regulars here, Mr. Jim Belushi.
Yes, I'm a regular now.
We are welcoming one of the great beloved Saturday Night Live cast members, Kevin Nealon. And we're going to talk about wine for our little project.
I was at the Column d'Or, and I had no taste in wine.
Yeah, and you
But
ordered...
I was with a beautiful lady, and the wine came, and I tasted it. And I'm like, I really don't like this wine. The guy just looked at me like, how could I not like it? I'm sorry.
Was it corked, or did you just send it back because you didn't like the taste?
No, I just didn't like the taste. I was very unsophisticated, and I was, I don't know, maybe I was looking for like a Coke or something. And he brought back a bottle of $750 of an 82 Moulin, 82 Moulin.
Yeah, Mouton Cadet. Yeah,
wow, you're like a sommelier.
Oh, I know why.
I'll tell you, I'm a spotty wine drinker. Not that I get spots on my shirt, but once in a while I only drink wine.
Yeah.
But if I'm with a beautiful lady and they bring me a bottle of wine, I'll swish it around. I don't know why they do that, but I'll do it. I'll take a little sip and I'll send it back. Not because it's bad, because I want to impress the girl.
Of course.
I'm really special, man.
No, it's no good, no good. Give me another bottle.
At Carleton University, there'd be these wash tubs full of wine and water, and they called them purple Jesus parties because you'd wake up in the morning going, Jesus, and your tongue would be purple. So a very, very proletariat consumption of wine early on. And it wasn't until I met Steve Cropper when we shot the Blues Brothers out here, and he introduced me to really great wines, ruining my taste. So that today, all I want is the best.
No, by the way, he does take tips at the end of the day. This is a new profession for him.
Well, I got some good tips for you, man.
Yeah.
Don't drink after 12.
Yeah, I got a tip for you. Open a bottle of wine.
We will drink some wine, gentlemen.
Let's drink some wine.
Grab a bottle there, let's see.
The guys always want to go straight to the drinking, but wine is one of those things that tastes better the more you know about it. Now, the first thing to know is that wine, like beer, was discovered by accident. Most of the best things are, I've found. It all started in the Neolithic period, after people had learned to plant and grow crops. So that was somewhere between 10,000 BC and 4,000 BC, which really doesn't narrow it down much. But the thing to keep in mind about the Neolithic period, that was when people stopped being hunter-gatherers and started to settle down and grow crops. And they did that in different times and different places. In the Near East, it was closer to 10,000 BC. In Europe, it was a lot later, which makes sense because it wasn't like the Neolithic people could just post a selfie in front of their crop and tag their friend on another continent. Hey, bestie, check this out. Nope, news back then traveled slow. But the point is, in the Neolithic period, people became farmers. And once you harvest your crop, you need a place to store it, like a clay jar, for instance. So imagine you're a Neolithic farmer who grows some grapes, and you store them in a jar, and some of them get smushed. And a little while later, the smushed part, the juice, ferments. And you discover that fermented grape juice tastes pretty good, tastes really good. You have discovered wine and winemaking, which thousands and thousands of years later is made pretty much the same way.
I like this very much.
There are all kinds of fancy winemaking techniques that come and go, and some of them are sort of very new. So I think concrete eggs, that's been very in lately. But concrete eggs are a kind of version of a very, very old form of winemaking where you bury the wine jar in the ground. This is called Qvevri winemaking. It's how the first wine was made thousands of years ago. So you needed quite a lot more technology to make wine. You needed pottery, and that's why you get beer first and then you get wine later.
But where exactly this happened first is the subject of debate among historians and wine enthusiasts. In 2017, archaeologists discovered pottery shards in Georgia, not the American state, the country in the South Caucasus Mountains. And in those shards were trace amounts of the oldest wine ever made. So now we know definitively where wine was invented, except we don't really, because the Chinese say they invented it in 9000 BC. Which may be true, but there's no solid archaeological proof. And then the Sicilians say they invented it, and they point to evidence of vineyards which date to around 4000 BC, so it's fuzzy. When something is complicated or confusing, my motto is skip over. Let's just say wine was discovered probably in the Near East or Georgia, and it was just a matter of time before it spread, which it did in 1550 BC, for instance. The trading and seagoing Venetians began to establish ports and settlements all over the Mediterranean, and they brought wine with them. So it went to Greece and Anatolia, which is now Turkey, down through the Holy Land and then across to Egypt. But it was in Greece that wine really reached its peak. It was in Greece where they turned wine drinking into a whole big thing. The Greeks planted vineyards. They say they were the first to do so, but so did the Sicilians and Chinese. So we're just going to say the Greeks planted a whole lot of vineyards and drank an awful lot of wine. I mean, I think it's fair to say that it was in Greece, in some gorgeous location, probably that the first people sat by the seaside drinking wine and looking at the sunset like they were in a Cialis commercial.
The volume of wine that can be made goes up enormously. They're much better places for growing vines than, say, Egypt. There's a lot more wine available for people. The rich people drink fancy wine, and then the ordinary people drink much less fancy wine, and then actually even the slaves are given wine. It's just really horrible, and you wouldn't want to drink it.
Some of the first vineyards in Greece were on the island of Santorini, which specializes in incredible sunsets, beautiful views, and still makes one of the oldest wines in the world, the crisp and minerally Assyrtiko, which is delicious but impossible to spell.
Vineyards originated in Greece in the mainland, and they also then moved to the islands. We're located in one of the most important islands for the prehistory of the Aegean. It was a location where the site of Aykroyd is found, where we have some of the earliest evidence for winemaking.
Now, obviously, you leave fruit juice out in a jar, it turns into wine. But the Greeks, once they discovered it, they turned it into a ceremony.
And that's another thing about wine. It inspired and still does rituals and religious practices, and all that really took off in Greece, where wine took center stage. They even had a god of wine, Dionysus.
He's the god of wine, and he throws one hell of a party.
They believe Dionysus presided over all wine-drinking parties, which would have made him a very busy god because the Greeks had a lot of those parties, which they called symposia. Wine was drunk wherever Greeks gathered and talked about philosophy, art, poetry, music, and politics. And let's face it, that really covers it conversation-wise. In fact, the very word symposium means drinking together. Now, I don't know if the Greeks had a word for drinking alone. That may not have happened until much later, around the birth of country music. But in any case, the Greeks liked to get together to drink.